What's up everybody? Welcome back to another video. Wow, it took me a long time to come out with this one, huh? If you don't know, I said I would do a community reaction video like almost 4 days ago now. And I'm sorry, I didn't think the video would take as long as it did. Hopefully next week and the week after that, I'll be much more on the ball, but trust me, we've got a lot to talk about. And speaking of which, happy birthday, Doctor Who! Yes, 60 years. What a momentous day, a momentous occasion. I'm glad I could get a video out, even if it does sadly have to be this one. Maybe I'll do a double upload if Doctor Who decides to release something. This video is being recorded a couple days before the 23rd. I had to push this one back because I'm working on some crazy stuff right now. Now, I know November, right round the corner of the huge 60th drop, maybe isn't the best time to start work on a bunch of projects, but to my credit, I am not just starting now. I am having my crunch now, but truthfully, I've been working on these videos for a long time. And yes, before you ask, one of them is my brief explanation of the Doctor Who EU, which is anything but brief, but another should be arriving close to Christmas, so you have that to look forward to. I'm very proud of it. I think it's going to be my best video yet, so don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. But anyway, we're not here for excuses, we're here for the reaction. If you're unaware, last Friday, Doctor Who dropped a short for children in need called Destination Scarrow, and well, that's what we're talking about. It's around 5 minutes long, it's the first on-screen appearance of the 14th Doctor, and the first insight into Russell T Davies' new writing and Murray Gold's new soundtrack. In this video, we will be going over people's opinions of the show, and then we will be diving into people's takes on the more controversial topic. That being Russell T Davies' comments on Davros. I'm going to be going in detail throughout the video, so you probably won't be lost, but if you do want more context, I have made a full video earlier this week talking about my opinions on the topic in detail. So you can check that out if you want. I want this video to act as a snapshot, a look into what the community was thinking at this time. I've noticed that over the years, a lot of the reactions of the community have not been well documented, so I'm seeking to amend that. Hopefully in the future, we can use this video as a resource and look back on it to remember what the consensus was of the time. With that said, I have compiled as many comments as I can, and let's just jump right in. Okay everyone, I want to start the video by showcasing my poll. I made this right after the short went live. I gave it 4 options, loved it, liked it, it was okay and bad, and as you can see from the options, the overwhelming majority of people liked the short, and in fact most loved it. I think we should keep this in mind going forward, that overall people's thoughts of the Children in Need short were highly positive. I wanted to start with this just so people can get an instant feel for how people reacted. It was positive, people liked it. Oh, and people were asking why I put the Peter Capaldi image that I love to use so much as bad. It's because I didn't have a 4th image. I don't really know what I could have put there. If you have any ideas for what images I can use, leave them in the comments below. I don't really know what I'm doing. Let's get on to the comments. Here's our first comment. It was absolutely brilliant. I only recently started diving into the audio dramas, and I was literally thinking this definitely had Genesis of the Dalek vibes, and it made me so happy for the Doctor to use those specific words and address the canon of it all. If you don't know what this is referring to, it's referring to the Genesis of the Daleks name drop in the actual short. They mentioned diving into audio dramas. This short is of course infamous for completely going against all of the audio dramas. I mean, lore-wise, this goes against everything we know from Genesis of the Daleks, everything we know from the expanded media. But I obviously don't want to go in and talk about that. Those were just my first initial thoughts while I was watching it. While I was watching it, I was like, hang on, this doesn't fit, but it's fine. We move on. Hey, let's look at this one. I pulled this one off of the comment section of the actual short because, damn, I love how although this is a funny skit, it's also cosmically horrifying. No matter what the Doctor does, he cannot stop the Dalek, and actually contributes to their existence an immense amount. Cosmically horrifying. You know the Homelander meme, where he's just watching the screen? This is me watching all of the Rusty Davies glazing. It goes crazy, man. Okay, let's go back to the comments under my post. Quite enjoyed it. Was hoping for more of a straight mini-sode, e.g. Born Again, but the comedy in it was fun. Excited to see 14 properly in just over a week. I am excited too. I do want to throw this out there, especially early on in the video. I am still very excited. I'm always incredibly optimistic about Doctor Who. You guys have seen me, well, basically throughout my whole channel, I've been incredibly optimistic about Doctor Who. So of course, I'm going to be incredibly excited whenever new content is on the horizon. I'm so excited, you guys. You don't understand how excited. I'm going to be talking about how excited I am for basically the whole video. But I will definitely agree that I was also hoping for more of a straight mini-sode, hoping for something that was just a little less quirky than what we ended up getting. But is what it is. Scaroth1979, great username by the way, says, I loved it. I found it a bit weird how recent Davros' accident must have been during Genesis if this is canonical. Like he must have left the room afterwards and exploded or something. I think it would be better if it was the Mark 1 or Mark 2 travel machine, since the Mark 3 is the one you see in Genesis. I mean, this is completely what I've been saying, right? Technically, this implies that this happens right before the events of Genesis. Like we're talking like a day or two before. But given obviously we're going to be talking about the controversy in a second, given that I mean, maybe it's just trying to point out that Davros did only become the Davros we know literally 2 minutes before he came on screen. Very good, expected a bit more, but guess it's being saved for next week. Gotten me excited for sure. I think this is most people's thoughts on it. Or should I say at least those people who have been in the loop, who've been following what Rusty Davies has been saying, building up the hype. We may have expected a little bit more than we should have, but you know, it's still okay. This guy really liked it. A lot of people really loved it. And I can safely say that I am definitely incredibly excited for the specials coming soon. I mean, I've been watching so many videos on Doctor Who, all of Rusty Davies. He's been going around on the One Show, even on Newsround. I've been watching all of these videos. Here's a good one from Dr. Skelly, one of my members, one of the GOATs. I'll admit that it's more so a poke of fun here and there, but I appreciate that they brought back Terry Malloy as Davros one more time, and the meta humor was fun to watch too. Yeah, I'm glad they brought back Terry Malloy as well. If you don't know, Julian Bleach is not the actor who they brought back. It was actually Terry Malloy. I was right the whole time, guys. My question is, when are they bringing back Michael Wisher? It was cool seeing past Davros. I imagined being a fairly normal guy for his species before he was damaged, so I was actually a little disappointed that he was just a stereotypically looking bad guy. I also found it weird that the Doctor could just go back to when the Daleks were being developed. Surely that would be time locked or something. But obviously it's not meant to be taken too seriously, and I still loved it. I definitely agree with the Davros design. I think that if we are going to stay outside the chair, which you know I've actually come to accept, it took me a little bit of time. I had my little whine, my little rant, but I have kind of come to accept it. I really hope that it's not this design, because this design is just so boring and so stereotypical. You could do so much with a new Davros design, and I'm talking totally new. I've heard some people say, oh, they want to keep the chair but maybe as a throne or something like that. Maybe that would be cool for like a one-off thing, but if you really want to go for a new Davros design, you've got to make something equally as menacing, equally as cool, and I feel like this one is just boring and it doesn't look that good, and I really wish I'd reconsider at least the design. I mean, you can make him look normal, and I think that would actually add to the menace of it, because we know how deranged he is. I mean, I obviously love Revelation of the Daleks, but an episode like Revelation of the Daleks, The Great Healer, which is what Davros plays in that, I feel like a similar story to that would be really interesting if Davros was just a normal guy. You would never suspect anything sinister about him. I feel like that could be a cool direction to take the character, although I must confess, I don't think we're going to be bringing Davros back anytime soon. So I don't know why I'm getting my hopes up. But don't worry, we're going to be talking about that more in a bit. Ian is swag said, I don't know why people have to have expectations for this. It's for charity and an anniversary special. It's cool to even had it to begin with. Just be grateful. No, I feel like it's still fair to have standards for the things you watch, especially when you compare it to the other Doctor Who shorts, which have all been better than this. I mean, I just wish people were this generous about the Chibnall era. I think the reasons I had expectations going in, and I did say in my reaction videos that I had pretty high hopes going in, is because I did like the previous shorts, and Rusty Davies, of course, has been hyping this one up for a few days now. But that's just my opinion. I understand some people will be grateful with anything, but as I said, it's just my opinion. What are we? Some kind of genesis of the Daleks. This is how I felt about the sketch as a whole. I remember when I saw this comment come up, I was dying. The dialogue was so ass. And the fact that this is not even too far off from how they actually said it, it feels like a really bad MCU project, not even a movie. It feels like an MCU Disney Plus show. That's what it felt like. I personally did not find any of the humor in the short particularly funny. Wait, I'm not meant to be hating, guys. I'm not meant to be hating. I like David Tennant's performance. I thought he was energetic. Does that counteract all of my criticisms? Tom Hussein 2099 says, funny, especially since it implies Davros lost his legs and got an eye transplant in like 10 minutes before the 4th Doctor showed up. Yeah, it is. I suppose that is funny. Deaded Gamers says, it was refreshing to finally see a competent piece, spelt wrong, of Doctor Who content for the first time ages. Loved it! Mr. Sand 7899 said, they did jokes about the Dalek name, and I was like, oh no, MCU humor. Yeah, same. But I did like this comment. I wanted to include it because I thought it was clever. I killed it. I killed it. I clied it. I liked it. This is a very good comment. Round of applause for you. You get comment of the video. Gold star. Ding. I'm a bit disappointed that I made zero reference to liberation of the Daleks. If the Doctor really regenerated 60 minutes ago, then I feel his reaction to the Dalek is pretty out of place since he just had to deal with the whole herd of them throughout the last hour of his life. Yeah, I'm also a bit disappointed in that. And liberation of the Daleks is actually pretty damn fun. I would suggest checking that out if you haven't already. I'm glad at the very least they're not doing a hard retcon of it, even if this short plays fast and loose with it. I mean, this short plays fast and loose with everything. Who Station says, I think it was just fine. The people hailing it as the best piece of Doctor Who content we've had in years simply because it has David and Russell attached to it are being over dramatic and are letting their disdain for the Chibnall era cloud their judgment of the short. You put it into words perfectly. A round of applause again, sound effects. Am I gonna edit it in? Maybe I'll be too lazy. At the end of the day, it was little more than a reference fest, which is fine. It's for charity. I don't expect... God damn it, did I seriously not cut the whole comment? Well, I'm going to assume that the rest of your comment was equally as insightful as the first part, and I will say I completely agree. A lot of people are letting their hatred fester. A lot of people, I feel, are supporting this era, not more so on its own merits, but simply because it isn't what came before. And what came before genuinely wasn't that bad, guys, like, for real. But let's look at what Robert Wigley has to say. He says, for all those saying they loved it, you may want to watch Unleashed. From what Rusty Davies said, that wasn't Davros before, what we all assumed was an accident, but that is him now going forward. Well, I've gone through a lot of people's comments on their reaction to the short. Overall, it was overwhelmingly positive. I would say every single comment we showed so far were people who loved it. There were a few criticisms, but even the people who gave criticism still enjoyed it, so I think we can call it a massive success. Let's look what the rest of this guy's comment has to say. I really hoped all the political correctness gone mad under Chibnall, spelt wrong, was going to go away with RTD's return. Why would you think that? I don't really understand these people who thought that Rusty Davies isn't more left than Chris Chibnall. Has anyone been paying attention to anything that he's done or said or done in the past? Political correctness gone mad is just not a phrase that can be used to describe the Chris Chibnall era. I mean, people even go on rants about how it's not left-wing enough, right? So how can it be political correctness gone mad if people on the left are accusing it of being too right-wing? Is the political correctness just Jodie Whittaker being Doctor Who? Is that like too far? I mean, genuinely, I'm trying to think. Rosa is an episode about how racism is bad. Yeah, that's political correctness gone mad. I suppose we can point to Orphan 55. That's talking about climate change, right? But like, there's been so many episodes talking about climate. Is that political correctness gone mad? Come on, guys. I feel a lot of people are just living in their own fantasy land where they're fighting their own shadow enemies. Oh, I suppose we're still talking about the short. My bad, guys. I don't have a script. I just pulled up a bunch of comments and I'm showing them to you with my commentary, okay? The moment the claw broke, I cringed so badly. Really hope this isn't a warning sign for things to come. Yes, agreed. If they dismiss this as a silly skit, that's fine, but RTD calling it a mini-sode, etc. makes me worry people are gonna spout this shit as canon. I mean, I kinda relate, and I feel like I've been hearing these same Dalek jokes again and again for like years and years. I wonder if people are gonna talk about how they can't go upstairs. You know what I mean? I personally found myself cringing a couple times throughout the short as well. Mostly because of the soundtrack. If you guys know me, you know I've sung the praises of Murray Gold in the past, but I have occasionally been critical of him. But goddamn, the music in that short just wasn't it. I understand, you know, it's a short, he's probably phoning it in, but still, you know, not the best first impression. Of course, people are gonna love it because Russell T Davies wrote it. If it was Chibnall, everybody would say it was a load of crap. True. Oh no, we're getting into the negative comments now. What the hell is this? Terrible, badly written, awful dialogue. The humor was poorly handled. Davros and the Daleks should have been menacing, not funny or comical. I mean, I agree. The exposition was ridiculous, very badly done. If this is Disney, who RT Disney, I'm out. Well, let's take the chance to right now deconfirm a couple of myths I've been seen spreading around the comments section like a cancer of misinformation. Disney does not own Doctor Who. Disney is not making Doctor Who. They are simply distributing Doctor Who. Disney is making Doctor Who in the same way that Sony is making Doctor Who, because Sony is also funding Doctor Who, if you don't know. So while we may be able to speculate and have conspiracy theories on whether or not Disney is influencing things behind the scenes, I personally think that the new era change was highly motivated by the fact that it was coming over to Disney Plus and they didn't want the show to start at series 14 on Disney Plus, considering series 1 to 13 can't be on Disney Plus due to like HBO Max, I think, or is it Hulu? One of the two, there's like a scheduling thing. So to make it easily accessible to people in Disney Plus, they're thinking of doing the rebrand to season 1. But that is still just a conspiracy theory, and there has been no official confirmation. In fact, I think Rusty Davies has come out and said that it's literally not changing anything. Now, whether or not you want to take him up on his word, I don't really know. It's really hard to trust Russell T Davies nowadays, because he says all this stuff like, oh, the 14th Doctor is entirely different, no gimmicks, no gimmicks, no gimmicks. But the more he says that, the more I think that there is a gimmick. In fact, it feels like every single one of his comments, I don't know whether or not I can take it seriously or not, because it might be like he's misdirecting us for a spoiler. Because I mean, look at his Instagram post where he said that this wasn't a comedy skit. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. Let's go on to the next one. Radioactive Cheese, now in Knuckle 4746, says, petition to exterminate Genesis of the Daleks from history forever, as it is now irrelevant. And this is the kind of reaction that I did not want to see. I understand the guy's joking, we're all having fun here, but please, please do not exterminate Genesis of the Daleks from history, guys. But I understand, we're all just kidding, we're all having fun. Oh, let's look at this one. We got a twofer. Friendly Otaku 9525 says, I actually think this minisode fits in really well. The Doctor says 60 minutes ago he was this brilliant woman, and Liberation of the Daleks covered the first hour of 14's life. And that is also intended to be canonical, despite being a comic. That is true. Though this is definitely more humorous, which makes sense since it was made for children in need, so I'm fine with that. It's a lot of fun. It's one of those things where the Doctor inadvertently contributes to something they didn't mean to contribute, and that can be funny, to be fair. Yep, true, very nice. Honestly, I thought it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed seeing Tennant bring back that energy. Moan was funny, and it was great to see pre-accident Davros too. Also good to see a Genesis of Daleks. So there we go. I think that those two comments, as you can see, they got 20 likes each. Those two comments pretty much summarize a lot of the community's thoughts on the show. They really liked it. They thought it was funny. It was glad to see David Tennant back. It was nice to support children in need. And it was cool to see Davros, a Dalek, and Moan, who is a celebrity who I've never heard of before and forever will be destined to be someone who I only know exists because they were in Doctor Who. Which, to be fair, is like basically every celebrity. Another twofer. Love the feature of Davros before his accident. Really gives an insight into the lore of the Daleks. True. Thought it was funny, and also I now believe it's 100% canon that the naming of the Dalek is part of the bootstrap paradox as revealed in Children in Need skit and will no longer be taking the criticism. Also love that Dalek claw. I hope it shows up again. On the first comment, as someone who's been a fan of Doctor Who for just so long, I don't wonder if anyone can relate to this. Back in the day, I used to have so many different like Doctor Who guidebooks. I would have like encyclopedias on Doctor Who, I would have like guides to the monsters, everything. And it would go through every single iteration of every single monster. And there would be a page on Davros, and of course it would go through every Davros from every episode and be talking about it in detail. And it was one of those things where they always talked about what he was like pre-accident. It was kind of like mythology to me. So to see it on screen is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing to me. It's one of those things that you assume just will never be shown on screen. And then of course in 2015 it was, but that was him as a kid, so there was still a massive time jump between him as a kid and then him in Genesis of the Daleks, and even between him as a kid and then him at the time of the accident. And I really didn't think of him looking like that. I thought he was way younger when he got blown up. I assumed he was like 20. And I expected him to be kind of normal. I didn't really expect him to be really super smart before the the accident. I felt like that kind of sparked his ingenuity, his drive. He was so devoted to make the Daleks because of the accident being the inciting incident. At least that's how I always interpreted the story. That's how the story I thought was always meant to play out. But it is monumental that now we do have an on-screen pre-accident Davros that is now going to be in all those types of books that I really enjoyed and still do enjoy, to be fair. Yeah, honestly, really like the short, but the idea of this Davros is really interesting to me. I think utilizing the show's timey-wiminess and bringing Davros back not by resurrecting him or writing the death Moffat wrote, Moffat didn't write, or whatever. Bringing in past Davros in this form definitely holds a far more interesting story potential. Maybe for an arc about him trying to prevent his demise, or an arc about how he invents the Daleks. I don't know, I'm not a showrunner. I just see potential. Yeah, I think this is a fun comment. We do already have an arc of how he invents the Daleks. There was a great arc. It's called Genesis of the Daleks. I would highly recommend checking it out. But I personally don't really see how having a past Davros has more interesting storyline potential. Personally, for me, if we look at all of the Davros stories, they have been kind of building linearly up until The Witch is Familiar, which I wouldn't even consider that a story. I would more so consider it, you know, two people talking while two other people walk around in the background. It's not really a story so much as a conversation, which is why I find it so boring. But that aside, if we look at all of the original Dalek stories, even Destiny, there is a clear through line, a clear arc from point A to point B, and then when you bring him back, you resurrect it. Davros has been resurrected like 3 times now. You bring him back in series 4, there is still even more, like there is still a through line between those events. And I think there's just so much more potential for future Davros stories that follow on from that rather than going back to the past. I feel like maybe you could do one story. You could do one story of Skaro pre-Daleks, and that would be like the whole gimmick, and you could put a lot into it, and that would be really cool. But if this is what Davros is going to be like from now on, and we're just cutting off all future appearances and we're just going back to the past, it's really limiting. Lahat S says, I thought it was great. Shame it was only 4-ish minutes, but I had a wide grin throughout the whole thing. David was great as always, and I like the humour. I'm hyped for the specials now. I am incredibly hyped for the specials now. I'm so hyped. You guys are not going to hear me shut up about them. I'm going to be making like 3 videos on each one. The length being so short is a little bit of a shame. It would have been great to have an extra minute on there. But yes, overall, I'm incredibly positive going into the specials. Maybe I'm crazy, but it felt very Disney-y to me. In terms of the tone, humor, timing, even some of the camera angles immediately reminded me of the DVD extra for Marvel or Disney animated stuff. Yeah, I feel that too. I found it good, but I don't like how the Dalek, the look of its travel machine before Davros became his old crippled self, as I always thought, or at least it was implied, that the travel machine was designed after his travel machine. True. The acknowledgement of the colour being an anagram of Dalek which is beautiful meta stuff. I love the Davros pre-crippled. Also, his idea for the Daleks came from the female Khaled, I forget her name, but it's in the Davros audio series I Davros. That is true. So the Dalek name, it is always been an anagram of Khaled, although of course Khaled was made up to be an anagram of Dalek, but we're talking from a timeline perspective. But in I Davros, it's the goddess of the Khaled, and so it's kind of like Davros is making the Daleks gods. The Khaled gods are the Daleks. It's some really cool, neat bit of writing there. I also love the new design of the 70s Dalek with its normal arm being added at the end. I liked it. Just remember to not take it too seriously, and sorry for my bad grammar. You did great, my friend. I didn't think the grammar was bad at all. IMO is a non-canonical comedy skit, which for some reason RTD claimed it's not. Destination Skaro is brilliant. I really enjoyed it. The jokes were pretty funny, and we all had a he said it moment when Tennant said Genesis of the Daleks. If you take it seriously though, it retroactively makes Davros a bit of an idiot. Yes, it does. The Daleks manipulator arm is literally based off a plunger in universe now. If you take it as canon, I also don't like that the Doctor named the Daleks. Not everything needs to be a bootstrap paradox. I feel like a lot of these comments kind of speak for themselves. Do you think this could introduce younger audiences to classic Doctor Who? And I said honestly no, which is a shame, but I just think it is what it is. Both this and Tales from the TARDIS are failures in terms of bringing modern audiences back to classic Who. Here's a good comment. Where do we even start? The show has always taken Genesis very seriously, so using it as a spoof and making the origins of the Daleks a comedic and ironic conceit is like making a prequel to Schindler's List, where Hitler gets his idea for genocide from a Gestapo officer's fart. It's tasteless, ridiculous, and weakens what was a very serious and emotive story. Spoofs can be effective, but not when a franchise is trying to parody itself. Imagine writing a Bond film like an Austin Powers movie, where the big bad turns out to be Bond's Oh wait. David Tennant didn't seem on form either. Felt like a CBBC presenter was standing on for him after 5 bags of Haribo and a vintage bottle of Sunny D. That's crazy. And the music? Did Murray Gold actually produce this? Or was he asleep when he got the call and got his child to just punch the backing track button on his Casio keyboard? That's crazy. I like the show itself, but the Unleashed segment was cringe, especially where Russell thinks he speaks for disabled people and or wheelchair users like myself. His words reminded me of how he thought it was the right decision to have 14 not in 13's clothes, despite said outfit being genderless and the master being allowed to wear it in Power of the Doctor. I don't mean this as an insult towards Davies, but he's odd when it comes to certain things. As much as I'm woke, I hate that word, I toe the line. He needs to be asking certain communities about how they feel about something instead of thinking his decision will please everyone. I think this is a great comment, and this person actually comments quite a lot on my posts. I think this is just a really fair assessment, because immediately what I thought was the 14 and 13's clothes thing as well, because it's just another example of Rusty Davies coming out and saying something when he doesn't need to and causing mass controversy where he doesn't need to. And in that case as well, it's particularly egregious because he was like, oh, I'm concerned, it might look bad, it might look bad. But in the exact same episode, there was a regeneration and they kept the clothes the same and there was no reaction whatsoever. There was nothing negative whatsoever. The worst I heard was someone saying that Sacha Dhawan's trim was bad. And fuck you guys, I can't unsee it now. But seriously, outside of that, I heard no one complaining whatsoever. In fact, they literally released this promo image, this production image, and no one complained. You heard not a peep. So it's one of those cases where Rusty Davies says something he doesn't have to, he's proven wrong, and yet he doesn't back down. And it's just so weird to me because those two comments, they feel like they're coming from two different sides of the political spectrum. Like he's wrong on both angles. How does that make sense? I'm trying to think of it from like his perspective, but the logic is just contradictory of both of the decisions. But we'll get into that more later. I thought this was a great comment. I think it highlighted a lot of things, and I also thought it highlighted that there is no ill will towards Rusty Davies. I think a lot of people can be critical of this decision without being against Rusty Davies, without even being opposed to Rusty Davies. They just disagree with the decision, and that not everyone is an enemy and not everyone is like totally not on board. They just don't like this one thing, and that's where I find myself as well. I've come out and I've said multiple times, including in my previous video, that I think Rusty Davies is a GOAT. I think it's admirable that he stands up for what he thinks is right, and I respect him immensely as both a person and a writer. I think he's a great guy, as I think all Doctor Who showrunners are a great guy. But I still feel that you can be allowed to disagree with this. Here's another one by Aegon6. I don't know, mate. I would really say it doesn't need to be that deep. It's just a fun little special to tide you over until the real thing. It's not even canon. Did you really expect concrete lore out of this? I think he's right. He's of course talking to me, and canon is eventually decided by us, right? So we can just decide it's not canon, then it doesn't matter. And did you really expect concrete lore out of this? I shouldn't have. I was wrong. This guy's right. I took it too seriously. It wasn't meant to be taken seriously. I figured that out too late, and as much as I can cope and seethe and say, oh, that was Rusty Davies' fault, in the end it was my fault for setting my expectations too high. However, this one is just, you know, it's kind of pissing me off. Doctor Who fans refuse to enjoy anything. God damn. It's like, no, I've been enjoying everything. I feel like the reason why this is such a crazy thing to comment on like my post specifically is how unbelievably positive I've been to basically everything Doctor Who. You can watch my 5-hour Doctor Who video. I am basically positive to everything apart from the fraud, but everything apart from that I am positive about. Just because I don't blindly love stuff and actually think about it and occasionally have criticisms doesn't mean that I refuse to enjoy things or that I'm not an optimistic person. I really enjoyed it. Sorry. No need to apologize, my friend. If you like something, love it unapologetically. Did I say that right? No, but seriously, I think that if you do like something, feel free to voice your opinion on it no matter what. It's perfectly fine to just stand your ground and say that you like something. I mean, look at me. I will repeatedly say over and over again, I think Series 11 is good. I don't care. It's the biggest cardinal sin that you can say in the fandom, and I get comments about it almost daily about how it's the biggest piece of shit they've ever seen in their life, but I still love it, and I don't really care. Okay, the difference between a hero and a villain is how they respond to the pain of their life. Davros is the epitome of a villain who turned his pain into hatred. And I think with that, we should finally, for real, move on to the topic of Davros. We're moving away from the short, we're moving away from people's overall positive opinions to what people thought about the Davros change and Rusty Davies' comments. And this comment, I think, is perfect. I think it understands the character of Davros really well. Davros did turn his pain into hatred. He wanted to inflict that pain on everyone else. It is a key part of the story, and it is, I feel like, something you can attach yourself to. It's what makes it so emotive. It's what makes Davros, you know, this unfeeling, unforgivable, horrific mass murderer who nukes his own people. It's what gives to him those layers that makes him just at least a slightly bit sympathetic. And I bet a lot of people will fight me on this, on whether Davros is meant to be sympathetic or not, because he is just so awful. Like, he is one of the most evil people in Doctor Who. But I do think in Genesis of the Daleks, I feel like this has been kind of a through line in everything apart from maybe Destiny. Maybe in Destiny of the Daleks they stopped it and they moved away from it because Destiny of the Daleks is basically a farcical comedy. But in everything else there is this element of tragedy, this layer of, oh damn, I really feel bad for Davros actually. There's this scene in Genesis of the Daleks where the Doctor, he turns off Davros's life support and he just like melts in his chair. And it's one of those things where you're like, oh my god, I know this guy is terrible and I know he's really evil and he's terrible, but god damn, don't you feel bad for him? And it's the stuff like that that makes me really emotionally attached to the character. Here's another comment. I was watching this with my eyes closed, and when you said this was Davros' permanent design change, my eyes literally shot open. What the fuck? His old design is iconic and makes his character. I'm really shocked. They definitely could have handled this better. At least keep the iconic prosthetic. I mean, yeah, his old design is iconic and makes the character. I feel like that's like putting it in the shortest words possible. That's the argument in favor of the old design. I don't have a physical disability, so maybe I'm being naive, but I honestly think that saying a group of people can't be something is just as offensive. What if there was a wheelchair user actor that wanted to audition for a villain role? Would they be not allowed to because it's offensive? Yeah, just because a character's a villain doesn't mean they're a bad character. It doesn't mean they're an unlikable character. There are plenty of badass villains. There are plenty of villains which people love. I think another comment I picked out goes into this in greater detail, but I'm going to talk about it now a little bit early and then I'll bring it up later. But there's a real hypocrisy in the way Rusty Davies understands his own community and the way he understands other people's community. Because if we look at the two main celebrity villains that have been casted for both the 60th and the Series 14, it's Neil Patrick Harris, a gay man, and Jinx Monsoon, both of whom are in the LGBT community. And yet Rusty Davies doesn't have this concern of, I found a real problem because we have a character who's LGBT and they're a villain. Well, no, because he understands the layers that members of the community really enjoy these villains. They find them fun, they find them cool, they find them badass, they find them funny. And Neil Patrick Harris looks like he's going to be all of those. He's going to be a campy villain in a long history of campy villains throughout not just the modern series of Doctor Who, but also the classic era. In fact, I would say that far more than the disabled trope that apparently has been around forever and ever, the more prevalent is the campy villains trope in Doctor Who. And yet Rusty Davies understands that that is something that part of the community actually celebrates and they find enjoyment in it, and it's what entertains them and it's what makes the show fun. Yet he can't imagine that there might be disabled people out there who could see a disabled character, even if they're a villain, and be like, damn, that guy's badass. As I said in the video, I think it's just really dumb to take an immutable characteristic and then assign moral value to it. Here's the next comment. The thing is, was this ever a problem before Rusty Davies told us it was a problem? No. An issue has been made out of a non-issue. Now, I have been doing myself a bunch of research into trying to find more posts that mention it, whether that be YouTube comments, whether that be Tumblr posts, whether that be Twitter posts. I have found Tumblr posts from 2009 and from 2017 that, well, the one from 2017 technically wasn't it, but I have found one post from 2009 that said that Davros was ableist, but that's one post in over 20 years. I've been going through every YouTube comment. I searched up Davros on YouTube and I went through all of the official Doctor Who YouTube channel's videos on Davros, or as many as them I could find. And I was going through the comments, I was checking through all of them. And outside of the ones that had just been commented from, obviously, the days after the short release, there was not a single mention of it, not even one. All I could find was praise. In fact, you know what I did find while doing my search for people who were calling Davros ableist in the past, I found Russell T Davies' comments on the previous Davros design, and boy oh boy are they different. He loves it. He loves the design. He was singing its praises. In fact, he was talking about some of the additions he made to it, which include a straitjacket. Ooh.
It's quite important to remember, I think this is literally Davros, literally the same man. So I wasn't out to reinvent it in that sense. Also, why reinvent one of the best villains ever? I don't know what more you add to Davros.
I suppose we'll have to get into more of the sins of Rusty Davies later. But it really is crazy to me seeing a lot of people who are really trying to gaslight the "there is no war" in Ba Sing Se, and say that this has always been a problem, say that they've always had an issue of it. I have really gone back. I've been scrubbing it, trying to find stuff. People have said, oh, you just weren't in those circles. Just because you didn't hear them doesn't mean those conversations weren't happening. I've checked, bro. The conversations weren't happening. What it feels like happened to me, and now obviously this is just pure speculation warning. What it feels like happened to me is that Rusty Davies was working on this, and probably someone in production, they came up to him and they said, I find this offensive. And I bet you anything, his first gut reaction was, that's dumb. What? Why would you think that? That's stupid. And then he had a little bit of time to think about it, and then he came to the conclusion to undo the change. I bet you anything that's what happened, and he expects us to already be at the conclusion with him. I think the problem with Davros' new design and David not regenerating into Jodie's clothing is Russell looking for potential controversies, avoiding them, and then calling out the controversy he didn't want to do, thus causing the opposite controversy. If they just didn't address the change or explain it as a timey-wimey thing, then there wouldn't be any discourse. Oh my god, so true. It feels like Rusty Davies, like he 4D chesses a controversy, and instead of just ignoring it and being like, phew, close shave, he brings it up so that the controversy that he was really trying to avoid happening happens anyway. And I think the main proof to show that if Rusty Davies just kept his mouth shut, no one would have complained and nothing would have happened, is his handling of the Celestial Toymaker. Now, let's look at this, right? Two villains that Rusty Davies brings back for the 60th anniversary. He gives both incredible redesigns. He even changes the name of one of them, and presumably changes the whole character too. And yet with one, people are up in arms, and the other, no one cares. I'm of course talking about how the Celestial Toymaker has been rebranded as the Toymaker, played by Neil Patrick Harris, and that change has been widely accepted by the fandom. I've heard basically zero complaints about it. In fact, I think literally everyone just blindly accepted it. Everyone was like, okay, well, I suppose this is just how it is going to be now. There was no backlash. And do you know why? Because Rusty Davies didn't come out and give some dumbass statement. You know, you can just change stuff for the sake of changing it. And there will be people like me who, you know, may take issue with a few things here and there, but it won't turn into this big deal if you just chill. Like, if you just stay quiet for 1 second. Rusty Davies, you're in a position you weren't in a couple years before, where before you could say anything on Instagram or whatever, and people would just be like, haha, Rusty Davies saying stuff, it's fine, it is what it is. Maybe there'll be a tabloid news story about it, some people trying to rage bait or whatever. It wasn't a big deal. Now, when you're showrunner of Doctor Who, the comments that you make matter far more, which is a shame, because I do really like that kind of no fucks given attitude that he has on his Instagram. I don't have an Instagram, by the way, but I see his comments. But Rusty Davies is kind of like tongue-in-cheek, like kind of like get fucked responses and posts basically for years now on Instagram, and there's been like no issue. But of course, when you're showrunner and you're directly responding to the fans, of course it's a bigger deal now. But on the topic of that, can I just say, even as someone who disagrees with Rusty Davies, god damn, I respect him. I rate it so highly that he stands his ground, and that when someone responds to him with this long post ranting, he just says tough. I mean, it's tough. That's tough. A lot of people had issue with my comment in the video where I said I thought Rusty Davies handled it with quite respectfully. I do think, and I stand by it, I do think he did, but they were like, oh, he's been so mean to the fans. And well, yes, I do think that those comments are a little unprofessional, but I think my overall point is that Rusty Davies, you need to take a leaf out of Chris Chibnall's book and just be a little quieter, just for a while. I mean, we were 1 week away from the episode. You can have been quiet just for 1 week. Let's move on to the next comment. It's not a wheelchair, it's the lower half of a Dalek. He's half Dalek. That was the conception of the character. Bruce says, I'm sorry, but character designs are a fundamental part of why people find characters interesting, especially in a visual medium. Also, Davros' appearance is fundamentally tied to his personality and the origins of the Daleks. I can't seriously believe there are people who sat there thinking, Nah, Genesis of the Daleks got it wrong. One of the highest rated and most iconic stories of the franchise was secretly ableist, and we, the mighty peoples of 2023, must correct them. Davros' design is designed to highlight the horrors of war, the mental impact such horror can have, and how easy it is for people to fall back on fascism to overcome said horror. That is all told through his visual design. They're replacing his iconic and unique design with generic angry Nazi in all black. Oh my god, standing ovation, checkmate. I feel like this comment hit on everything. I mean, I talked about iconography in the video, but this guy, he just says it in such a more concise way. Character designs are so important and so inextricably tied to how a character is perceived, how iconic a character is, especially when you put them in the visual medium. Like, it is just so true. Do you think the Daleks would have been successful if they didn't look like that? I can tell you for a fact they wouldn't, because Terry Nation directly tried to repeat the process and it never stuck because the designs aren't as good. The reason Davros keeps returning is because that design is so iconic. Let's look at the Series 4 Stolen Earth. I love this episode. Let's look at how Davros is introduced. We see him in shadow. It's silhouette only. We see the blue eye. We know instantly who it is. The visual storytelling there. Now, of course, back then we did know that Davros was going to be in it, but just imagine you had no idea that Davros was going to be in it, and then Davros showed up just in that silhouette shot. You are like, oh my god, it's Davros. Now imagine that, but instead of it being Davros, it was just some random guy in his shadow. Do you think that would have been impactful? And also, I must be the one to say it, but Genesis of the Daleks, and in fact I'll pile in Resurrection, Revelation and Remembrance into this as well, I would say that all of these stories far outclass anything Rusty Davies has ever put out in his life. I mean, it just is what it is. Like, I've really loved a lot of Rusty Davies stories and stuff like that, and as I've said, I think he's a great writer, but they just don't hold up. When you compare them to that standard of some of the best Doctor Who of all time, his episodes just are not even in the discussion. And then when you look at some of his other episodes like Tooth and Claw and New Earth and stuff like that, and you're like, this is the guy who's coming after Remembrance of the Daleks. New Earth, writer of New Earth, is coming after Genesis of the Daleks. And I swear we will get to it, but I will be talking about why it's so hypocritical for Rusty Davies to be saying this in just a little bit. But I want to get through a few more comments before that. Pre-accident Davros makes sense, especially for children in need, but they have to have a good story reason if they're going to make present-day Davros able-bodied. The last time we saw him on screen, he siphoned a bunch of the Doctor's regeneration energy. That could be a good way to do it if they insist without retconning anything. Now, okay, I've been seeing this spread like wildfire so much. People have been talking about my favorite story, The Witch is Familiar, and a lot of people are just mindlessly spewing it without having actually rewatched the episodes themselves, barely remembering stuff that may have happened. Maybe they saw an image, maybe they didn't, maybe they just kind of vaguely remember what happened in the story. But Davros was not using the Doctor's regeneration energy to come back as like a regular guy, because why would he do that? He's had plenty of chances to come back as a regular guy and he hasn't, because he likes the design of the Daleks. The Daleks are like him. He doesn't want to be not like a Dalek. If anything, he wants to be closer like a Dalek. That's why he used Dalek cells to regenerate his body. That's why in Remembrance of the Daleks, he basically is just a Dalek. And also, I think a lot of people, now this comment doesn't specifically mention it, but a lot of those did. Davros was pretending in The Witch is Familiar. A lot of people said to me, oh, the reason Davros opens his eyes is because he gets the regeneration energy from the Doctor and that regenerated his eyes. No, again, you need to rewatch the episode. The reason the Doctor gives Davros the regeneration energy is because Davros opens his eyes. Davros opens his eyes before the regeneration energy comes into the picture. I mean, the whole story of The Witch is Familiar is just so unbelievably shit, and it makes me very sad that it's one that is going to have to be remembered instead of just brushed over and completely ignored, because the whole story just makes no sense. Part 1 is basically entirely set up for Part 2, and Part 2 is basically just one conversation where both the Doctor and Davros are both lying, which makes the whole thing pointless and the whole thing lacks any nuance, and it thinks it's so much cleverer than it is, but just nothing is happening throughout the whole story. And the way they resolve it, god damn, sorry to go on a rant, but this shit is far more egregious than anything Rusty Davies has been doing. The way the Doctor wins, the way the Doctor beats Davros, can you believe this, guy? People actually accept this and say this is a good episode. The way he wins is by giving Davros what he wants. Davros' plan is to use the regeneration energy, right, to revive Skara. The Doctor gives his regeneration energy to revive Skara, but Davros didn't realize that if his own plan succeeded, he would lose. So Davros wins But the Doctor wins because Davros' plan was so unbelievably shit that even though he won, even though his plan succeeded, he still lost because his plan's outcome is him losing. That is just so many layers of dumb piled on top of each other. People will tell me, oh, but it's a good episode because, you know, the Doctor rides a tank. The Doctor rides a tank in the third act of part 1. People don't realize how far into the episode that scene is. Straight up, nothing happens in these stories. Part 1 is like Clara and Missy talk for a little bit, they go back to the past, then they get taken by Colony South to Skaro, and that's it. That's all of part 1. Then part 2 is the Doctor and Davros talk, Missy and Clara talk, the Doctor and Davros turn out to be pretending, and then the episode ends, and that's it. That's the whole thing. That's 2 parts. It's the first story with the Master and Davros in it, and that's how they blow it. It's the last story with the OG Davros design in it, and that's how they blow it. Please do not make the next episode with Davros be a follow-up to that one. Please, dear Lord. And also, a lot of you guys need to rewatch the episode to see how that actually worked, because it's not working the way you think it's working. Green Goko My Goat says, big comment being condensed as much as possible. I 100% agree with the assessment of how the battle scars gained by Vader and Davros shows how they overcame their injuries. Vader is in pain, unable to breathe, as he and his master decided he needed to be punished from the Mustafar. Yeah. For Mustafar. Yeah, I see what he means. Davros being the Dalek prototype, seeing hate and will to survive as the only driving forces worth including. 2. Personally, I like seeing the Khalids again, but I miss Davros' face. If he walks, that's not a big deal to me since it's a semi-canon skit, and he is clever enough to make cybernetics, but his age and the Dalek's eye was part of his body and personality. All in all, I like the Khalids being back as they are a sinister society forged in war, and Davros looks cool, but not as Davros. 3. I like the skit as a skit, but if it is implied to be canonical, that seems not great. 4. Night of the Doctor better. It was meant to be inserted into canon fully, so maybe a bit unfair. Yes, in my video I pointed out a comparison which even there I said is a little unfair between Night of the Doctor and Destination Skaro, and yeah, it is a little unfair, but it was more so to put forward the point that this is what we got for the 50th, this is what we got for the 60th. It is a marginal step down. Another great comment from the GOAT. Let's move on to the next one. RTD said there is a long history of villainous wheelchair characters in film and TV, but I honestly can only think of 3. Dr. Finkelstein, Max Capricorn, and John Lumic. 2 of these are Rusty Davies characters. I don't know who Dr. Finkelstein is, so yeah, the only 2 I could think of were Max Capricorn and John Lumic as well. In fact, the only one I could think of was John Lumic, who is a Rusty Davies character. And I think this is a really prime example of what I'm talking about, because John Lumic as a character, if Rusty Davies was going to apologize for something, if he was going to be consistent, he should apologize for John Lumic, because John Lumic as a character is just a rip-off of Davros. That's what his intention is. It's meant to be like a kind of nod to us fans being like, oh, the Cybermen have their Davros as well. And it's so lame. You can go back and check my previous videos. I have always said that the Rise of the Cybermen, Age of Steel are shit episodes, and this isn't why, but the main reason why is the laziness, and John Lumic just plays a bigger role into that. The episodes are lazy. They have a lazy conclusion, they are poorly paced, it's a poorly thought out origin, it's derivative of other works, it's unoriginal, it's lame, the design is terrible, the sound design is terrible, the Cyberman's characterization is terrible, the earpod stuff is stupid and doesn't make sense. I have a lot of complaints about that episode, as I have a lot of complaints about a lot of the episodes in series 2. But John Lumic, if we are going with Rusty Davies' logic, where it's like, oh, wheelchairs have been used for a shorthand for villainy for writers forever, well then John Lumic is definitely that. Now I've seen a few people cope and say, oh, it was an accident and that's why he was in it. The Cyber Controller, which is a redesign from a design where he was not attached to any chair whatsoever, is literally in a wheelchair. If we're calling Davros a wheelchair user, then this definitely is. And while I gave all of the rich thematic reasons for why Davros looks the way he does, what is the logical reason for John Lumic, the Cyber Controller, to look like this? He's literally a Cyberman. He literally gets out of it. So why was it there? Was it a visual shorthand, maybe? I mean, for me, especially when you look at his comments on Davros and all of the comments of people talking about Davros at the time, and you know, the rich layered history and how deeply they admired it, to pretend that there was this deep conversation going on around this time is just a little disingenuous. And to then put forward that that design needed to be changed because times have moved on, but you don't address the fact that you completely ripped off the design for a completely inferior version in a terrible story. I do find that a bit strange. There's so many layers of hypocrisy in the statement, all of which could have been avoided if he just didn't mention anything. But let's get into that a little bit later. Let's focus on this. It's important to remember that 10 years before he gave us Davros, Terry Nation gave us Dawn, a brave, resourceful scientist in a wheelchair who fought the Daleks in the Dalek invasion of Earth. Disabled people are people. Some are nice, some are nasty. Oh my god, what a great comment. Yes, the Dalek invasion of Earth features one of the main scientists, one of the main leaders of the resistance, in a wheelchair, and he sacrificed himself, and it's a really emotional moment. He's a great character. He has a lot of layers as well. As you can see when we're comparing them, Terry Nation is a better writer than Rusty Davies. His characters have a lot more thought and depth to them than the kind of usually surface level assessment that Rusty Davies goes for. Not necessarily to hate, they are two different styles. Of course, Rusty Davies is more bombastic. He likes to have things that are instantly recognizable. He likes to have very loud, very giant set pieces, whether that be action or comedy. Whereas some people in the past, like Terry Nation, they focus more on the themes of the work, on stuff you really have to sit and think about. Of course, I'm not saying that Terry Nation's stories aren't incredibly exciting. I would say they are, but they're also much more thoughtful, and they aren't really things which you can just point to one thing and say, that's wrong. I would think to do so is an insult to kind of the direct DNA of Doctor Who, which is the Daleks. I hope that he changes his mind and just makes the Davros pre-accident Davros. I like pre-accident Davros in the episode to show he was once human-like. The outfit worn by him was worn in Genesis of the Daleks, I believe, so it's possible it's before. I think this shows the mindset of most people who watch the short, in that they really like the short, and then they heard Rusty Davies' comments and they're like, why, man? I would have enjoyed the short if you just not said nothing. It appears that a lot of people like the idea of a pre-accident Davros. Now, I personally believe that Rusty Davies is never going to change his mind. At least he's not going to actively go against his previous comment anytime soon. But I do hope he does see the overwhelming fan backlash to this change, and it's not all from detractors. Yes, there are a few weirdos and losers who are throwing a massive hissy fit and talking about how it's PC gone mad, Doctor Who, more like Doctor Woke. But I hope he sees that also from our side of the fandom, you know, people who are more level-headed, who are more sensible, people who have lived experience, people who have a deep adoration of the show, people who respect him as a person and as a writer, still are disagreeing with that. I hope he doesn't think that all of the people who disagree with him are this blanket haters, blanket bigots. I hope he understands that there is nuance in the conversation here, and that a lot of people who took issue with that one comment are still firmly on his side. Rainbow Duck says, his phrasing of "I had a problem with it" is the part that really rubs me the wrong way about this. If there was a loud outcry from the disabled community, then I could maybe get behind it. However, making this drastic change to the canon seemingly from a whim, within his own head, with some made up ideas of how he's actually doing it for virtuous reasons, I can't get behind that. And yeah, I mean, there is no outcry, there is no conversation that's happened here. I've tried searching for it, I've tried so hard. You guys, I've really tried. Like, I have been scraping through old archive forums, through Doctor Who YouTube comments from like 10 years ago, through the pages of Google. I just can't find it. I can't find the conversations talking about it. And I would imagine in the future from now, Davros' design will be reverted back. I can't see this change sticking, especially once Rusty Davies is gone. And I think a lot of people really need to know that. A lot of people really need to not live in the moment. Rusty Davies isn't going to be here forever. In fact, when he leaves, it's probably going to feel like, oh damn, I just remember when he was just joining. Because that's what it felt like to me when Chris Chibnall announced that he was leaving. I was like, damn, you just got here though. And so when a new showrunner comes in, if a new showrunner comes in, hopefully there'll be a new one, I can imagine Davros' design being reverted. But of course, that's just my opinion. That's just my assessment of things. I think what was the spit out my drink moment was the Davros was a wheelchair user comment in the Unleashed voice overview. Like, the earnestness of that statement. It was like having a Star Wars documentary and the voiceover narrator saying Darth Vader was an asthmatic. Like, surely, the lack of self-awareness saying something like that made my stomach sink initially. I mean, he kind of hit it on the head. When I first heard the comment, I thought it was a joke. I did. I thought he wasn't being serious. And then the sentence kept going and it dawned on me and I was like, oh, he's serious. And then all of the revisionists came out of the woodwork and were like, yes, this is how it's always been. It's always been this way. There is no war, in Ba Sing Se. But it was just so crazy to me because like no one's ever thought of it that way before. It's just such a ridiculous thing to say. And I love the comparison because it's so apt and it's also so accurate, and yet it makes me laugh every time just reading it because it's a funny thing to imagine, but it's the same thing that happened. Couldn't agree more. I think everything Davies has said, from his clothes regenerating to this Davros issue, have been bizarre, and I don't think anyone would have had an issue with either things if they hadn't been changed. Just weird. I mean, so true. Who would have had an issue with either of these things? It's like he's shadowboxing. And the craziest part to me is that the people who had the biggest issue and who I was on the side of before, when it came to the David Tennant regenerating clothes thing, are the same people who are against me now with this Davros thing. It's like I was just on your side literally 2 seconds ago. And it makes me wonder, like, which side is Russell T Davies on? Why is he doing this stuff with no consistency? And of course it ties back into what I said about the toy maker, right? Like, that is a case of, oh, we changed the design, or we changed the name, we changed the character, but we're bringing it back and we're still respecting the work, and there's no fan backlash whatsoever. And I think it's the moral grandstanding, acting like you're moralistic for either liking or disliking Davros, or I think that's what people take issue with, because of course you're going to respond protectively of something that you like. So to have it be accused of something, especially when you perceive it as unjustly, you're gonna feel bad. So if you're gonna make these changes, just do it, right? Like, I have no problem with showrunners coming in and changing shit and doing things up how they want them. But my problem comes in when they give these weird ass reasons. Like, you don't need a reason, you're the one in charge. You could just say, because I felt like it, and I'd accept it. Okay, this one is from Joel Mole 3157, who comments on a lot of my posts. I really like seeing what this guy has to say. He says, I think it's a case of, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. The reason works for the sketch, but it's weird to do it from now on. Time will tell if Davros will actually stay like this, but if we do have to have this talk, maybe it's time to retire Davros as a character. The Daleks are doing just fine on their own, and we can have new Dalek antagonists like the Time Controller. I love the Dalek Time Controller. Besides, what else can you do with him? The Witch's Familiar left him in a pretty conclusive spot. Not everything has to be a culture war. And this goes out to both Russ T Davies and the fandom. Oh my god, chef's kiss, mwah. I'm so sick and tired of this culture war, sugar. I'm done with it, from both sides, but mostly from not Russ T Davies' sides, but still both sides. It's so boring, man. However, I do say I completely disagree with the assertion that there's nothing to do with Davros left. There's so many ideas that you can do to bring Davros back. There's so many, and I definitely do not think the Witch's Familiar left him in a pretty conclusive spot. If that was the last Davros story, I'll hate it even more. I'll hate it forever. I'll never forgive it. Stephen Moffat said it was a fumble. Yeah, you can say that again, pal. Please, please, please. Russ T Davies, if you listen to one thing in this video, you can ignore the rest. If you listen to one thing, please do not let The Witch's Familiar be Davros' last story. Please, I beg you, I implore, I'm on my knees. I'm like Peter Capaldi in The Magician's Apprentice. Tubian says there is a way they could change Davros' appearance without changing canon. I saw a YouTuber's video about his idea that because the 12th Doctor gave Davros some regeneration energy, it continued to heal him and restored him to his former self. If Russ T Davies stays with the undisfigured Davros, I hope they do something like that. Again, this goes back to what I said before. It didn't really happen in the episode. I mean, I suppose if they are going to continue on and if they are going to use that example, which I hope they don't because it doesn't make any sense, then they're probably going to just, you know, show a brief flashback and be like, the regeneration energy rejuvenated me or some BS like that. But the reason I have an issue with it, apart from of course me not liking that story, is that it doesn't make sense and it isn't what Davros was trying to do in that story, and it doesn't make sense with Davros' character either. Honestly, I think I would rather no explanation than that explanation, but I have such little faith in what's coming next that at this point I'm fully expecting a flashback sequence to that with overdramatic music playing over the top of it to happen in season 15 or whenever Davros is coming back. Let's look at this one. Good video and good points raised, although I shiver thinking about the inevitable hate RTD will spark within parts of the fandom given enough time. Because that's what has happened with every showrunner thus far. Oh my god, the vindication. The cycle of showrunner hate, the wheel keeps turning. Play my clip from like a couple months ago. The cycle of showrunner hate is the name I've come up with to describe the phenomena of fan backlash towards the current showrunner of hit sci-fi TV show Doctor Who. You may be looking at me funny and thinking, the hell are you talking about? That thing doesn't exist. But the rest of you, I know you're listening and nodding along because this thing is real. The cycle begins like this. The new showrunner is announced. A heavy sigh of relief. What came before was so bad. This is new. This is gonna be good. Next, a few concerns. Maybe this won't be good. Next, I'll give it a chance. Next, this is so awful. They ruined this. They ruined this. They ruined that. Terrible episode. The worst in the show's history. The worst in history. What a joke. Doctor Who's ruined. They announced he's leaving. Thank God. And this new guy's coming in. Rinse, repeat. Now, which showrunner do you think I was talking about? All of them. I was talking about all of them. This happens every time. This happened with Russell T Davies. This happened with Stephen Moffat. This happened with Chris Chibnall, and it's already started happening with Russell T Davies again. Wow, what a surprise. I was completely right. It's almost like this thing happens every time. I was so excited for Russell T Davies to come back, but if this is a hint at his thought process going into the new era, then all hype for the new era is gone. We're literally seeing it play out in real time, guys. They called me a madman. I agree with you, but I don't think he's planning on using Davros anytime soon, and I'm doubtful his character design will remain like this from now on. I imagine that when a new showrunner comes in, of course, the design will be changed, and yes, I also agree, I don't think Davros is going to be used anytime soon. I imagine Davros just won't get used. This was definitely supposed to be a pre-disfigurement Davros. I'm not a classic Who fan, so my investment in the character of Davros is limited, but he's a product of his time where disfigurement was just an easy shorthand for a character being evil. Well, as soon as you said I'm not a classic Who fan, you lost all the right to talk in this conversation. I'm sorry. I hate this change for a simple reason. Davros designed the Daleks based on his disabilities. His mechanical eye became the Dalek eye stalk, his damaged and useless hand became the Dalek plunger arm, his wheelchair became the Dalek's mode of transportation. He was the Dalek's god, and he made them in his own image. Oh my god, finally someone get. I'm glad that, you know, when I mentioned this in my video, there were some people who could come on and they could show that they also understood what I meant. They also understood the symbolism, the imagery being used, the visual storytelling, and the actual storytelling. It really is not as simple as this comment claims with, oh, it's just a shorthand. Come off it, man. I feel like downplaying Terry Nation's mindset going in, like, oh, he was just writing random bollocks. No. In Genesis of the Daleks, Davros was played by the late Michael Wisher, who was the original and the best. Well, you know, he was great, but I don't know about that. Elizabeth Sladen said of him that during rehearsals he wore a paper bag over his head because he knew that in the studio recordings, John Friedlander's mask would allow him no facial movement or expression. As a result, he had to create the character using only his voice, and he gave a towering performance. Terry Nation should have definitively killed off Davros at the end of the story because, rather like the Master, he ended up as an overused character and panto villain, and none of the actors who followed him were as good. Now, he kind of lost me at the end there, because Terry Nation of course did kill Davros in Genesis of the Daleks, but I also believe that Terry Malloy was an incredible Davros. He, in my opinion, is the best. David Goodison is great as well, he doesn't get enough credit, and of course Julian Bleach, you know, he's pretty good, but I would say that Michael Wisher and Terry Malloy are the GOATs in my opinion, and I wouldn't call Davros a panto villain. I mean in this skit he is a panto villain, but like in the show in general I wouldn't say that. And while the Master, yes, after being brought back by Russell T Davies and with Missy, I mean, they're just ludicrous. It's basically not the same character. I've actually had a video in the works for ages talking about the modern Who Master and my problems with it. But back to the comment, oh my goodness, people really don't understand just how powerful Davros's performance is in that episode. The Daleks actually, for most of the story, don't speak. So instead, Davros does the speaking for them. And this is what I mean when I said in my video that Davros is inhuman, because he's literally screeching, exterminate. He's screaming that. He's screeching again, and I can't do it justice. You really do have to watch the episode for yourself. He speaks like a Dalek, he sounds like a Dalek with a voice modulation. He is a Dalek, and the design is meant to show that. You seeing him scream, exterminate, just like the Daleks do. He's speaking for the Daleks until the very end where the Daleks finally speak, and then they of course kill him. There is an incredible scene, a very famous scene, where the Doctor asked Davros if he had a vial that contained a particle that would kill everything in the universe, would he set it free? And he says yes. And of course the vial is a metaphor for the Daleks, something which a lot of people for some reason miss, and they don't realize that when Davros says yes, he would do it, he's literally telling the Doctor, yes, I would let the Daleks out. Yes, even though I have the chance to turn them good. And he does. That's a big part of Genesis of the Daleks. There is the choice to avert the Daleks' creation to make them peaceful, loving creatures, and Davros chooses not to, right? It's a choice, and the choice is because of what happened to, oh my goodness. This video is just going to be 2 hours of me praising Genesis of the Daleks. But there's a scene at the very end where he's gonna push the button to deactivate the Daleks and he doesn't. And it's because it mirrors the vial scene. There's so much thought. Again, I have to bring it up again. Terry Nation is a great writer. Back to this comment, I will disagree and say that I thought that the actors who followed are still good. This is a good one. I like this guy. Cyber Controller says, whenever Russell T Davies explains himself, it always paints him in the worst possible light. True! At this point, why does he do it? He always gets egg on his face.
We're refurbishing a classic, I think, and reintroducing it to a brand new generation. It's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Actually, if you wanted to change the Davros design, make him a full Dalek. Maybe with a brain in a jar to differentiate him. Yeah, why not? I would definitely take that design over the new one proposed. I would also say that this kind of is reminiscent of his appearance as the Great Healer in Revelation of the Daleks, where he is just a head in a jar. Does that count as a wheelchair? But still, I think if you're going to do that, you may as well just put him as his normal design. But I understand, you know, makeup costs, it costs money. Tony Young says, using a sardine as a villain would offend children with problems involving flatulence. And here we are. I'm finally going to talk about all of Rusty Davies' sins, because in my research, while I was looking for people who were offended at Davros being ableist, while I couldn't find that, what I could find was record after record of people being offended at Russell T Davies' era of Doctor Who. And I'm talking everything from the sardine to the adipose. There is a huge paper trail, far more than Davros being ableist. There is so much more records of people calling the sardine and the adipose fatphobic and all of that. It's actually not even funny how big a discrepancy there is. So to all of you who say, oh, maybe you're just not in those circles, bro, it's funny because the sardine are meant to satirize politicians, but none of the politicians of the time were fat. Now, what someone sensible, like you or me, might say is that, oh, the sardine are successful because kids like farts. Farts are funny to kids. That's why the sardine are on the Sarah Jane Adventures. But if we use Russell T Davies' own logic against him, he was subjecting children, not even families, but children specifically, to fatphobic rhetoric and teaching them not to trust fat teachers or fat social workers, such as in the Revenge of the Slovene. And I'm not usually one to point fingers and say, oh, this is wrong, oh, this is ableist, this is fatphobic, etc, etc, etc. But I must say, while I was watching The Gift, the Sarah Jane Adventures episode, I was watching it, I thought in the beginning scene where they have a Slovene and he's some fat guy and he's doing some farting around, even me, I cannot help but think, damn, why are we so mean to fat people? Like, what did he do? He's not even that fat. Then, of course, you have the adipose. People are talking about that. And that's just talking about the controversies that were in front of the screen. Oh my God. You know what Rusty Davies needs to apologize for? The fact that Chris Eccleston left the show because Rusty Davies actively defended an abusive producer instead of siding with the staff. I feel like people don't talk about that enough. Like, Rusty Davies, you might want to come out, right? If we're in this kind of, it's 2023, new lens, things are not okay as they were before. I feel like he should come out and apologize to Christopher Eccleston, because Christopher Eccleston got blacklisted from the BBC, an incredible actor, one of the best doctors, the person who brought Doctor Who to life, who brought Rusty Davies' writing to life. And Rusty Davies just totally threw him under the bus. He totally screwed him over, gave him the middle finger, said fuck off. And why did he do it? Well, because Christopher Eccleston actually cared about the staff's well-being. And if you think, oh, this is just a one-off case, and then you see that multiple stars of the time were accused of sexual misconduct, and then you're like, oh. But my point is that if we are judging things based on how edgy or how unacceptable they are, then basically everything from the Rusty Davies era gotta go. If we look at the Ood, that is actually such a bad metaphor for slavery. It's honestly insane. Like, it's actually crazy. You've also been seeing videos popping up about how Russell T Davies is racist because of his treatment of Martha. As you guys know, I love Martha, so obviously I'm gonna heavily disagree and back my boy. But if Russell T Davies really is gonna retroactively go back and say this stuff is not okay, this stuff is not okay, I think the person who he needs to go back back and look at the most and apologize the most for is himself. Not that I want him to do that. Let me be clear here. I don't think that Rusty Davies should do that. I don't think Rusty Davies has a reason to do that. And I think it'd be an incredibly dumb thing for him to do. But if we're using his logic, right? Like if we're using his logic, if we're using his ideology, the most guilty party is him. That's all I'm saying. As a disabled person, I felt like Davros being a wheelchair user was never tied to his villainous actions. He was just a disabled villain. Like, what the heck? I do have a problem with a lot of offensive tropes in movies and shows about disabled people, but this doesn't feel like one of them for me. He's not a villain because he's disabled, he's just a villain. This stance from Rusty Davies is ridiculous in my opinion. Even as someone who really wants to see more disability representation and gets super mad about ableist writing in shows. This is just a misguided decision, I think. I see what he's trying to do, but he's going about it in a weird way. Look at this, right? I feel like I've got like dozens of examples from people who are like, you know what, I actually agree with Rusty Davies politically, and I still think he's wrong. At that point, when you have people from both sides of the aisle heavily disagreeing with you to that extent, I think it's time to give it up, Sarge. Spot on. If Classic Davros was an evil wheelchair user, then so were all the Daleks. This retcon is absurd, and it doesn't inspire confidence in the show's direction moving forward. Now, it's funny that we mention that because I've seen a few posts going around, a few insane, they put the insane and insanely laughable comments about how the Daleks need to be distanced from the Doctor Who brand because it's so weird that Doctor Who is marketing Nazis. This isn't a straw man, by the way. I've genuinely seen this. I think I'm gonna try and find it. Hopefully it will be shown on screen right now. But I was like reading this shit and it's like, god damn, this is just the next step. We're gonna get rid of the Daleks because, oh, we can't be marketing the Nazis as if that's how that works. I'm like a mega super Dalek fan, and I know Rusty Davies is as well. Come on, dap me up, brother. Me and Rusty Davies come from the same breed where we kind of love the Dalek Doctor Who stories just far more than the rest. We're Dalek fanboys, right? There is a certain subset of Doctor Who fans. They're more so Dalek fans. And I kind of fall into that myself. I mean, the Daleks were what made Doctor Who popular, right? So if the Daleks were taken away from Doctor Who for a reason as stupid as that, I mean, would I stop watching Doctor Who? Would that be the one thing, the one move they could do to make me stop watching Doctor Who? Keep in mind, I'm like the biggest Doctor Who fan of all time. Now, of course, let me be clear. Let me verify that statement. People like Rusty Davies and Chris Chibnall, who both said we're taking a year off break for the Daleks. Now that I find perfectly fine. Do whatever you want with the Daleks. You can not include them in your whole era. You can include them a million times in your whole era. I don't mind what anyone decides to do with the Daleks as long as it's not permanently getting rid of them for a dumbass reason like that. But anyway, enough of that, let's go on to the next one. Let's look at this one. This guy says, going into the video, I would have disagreed with you, but now I have thought about it for a while. I think I would so too. I am what people might call a woke snowflake, but I've been a Huvian for around 15 years too. I want to watch shows like Doctor Who, and I don't mind being educated along the ride, as long as it isn't shoved down my throat. Show don't tell should apply to your agenda too. If you want to feel inclusive, that's fine, but don't tell me it is bad to be exclusive. Show me what happens if you are exclusive. I don't really know what that means. I agree the clothes regeneration and the wheelchair stuff is the wrong mindset to have. It's fine for a straight man to wear women's clothing in those circumstances, and it's fine for Davros to be evil and be in a chair. I mean, yeah. There is a canon point for future Davros to be like this. Remember the witch's familiar Davros was regenerated enough energy to reanimate dying Daleks, blah 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 blah. I don't think Davros would choose to change since he has convinced himself that he's closer to perfect than the rest of us. This guy gets it. And also Davros was not rejuvenated in the episode, but you know what, go off. John says, so let's eliminate characters in wheelchairs or limit the roles they can play. Makes perfect sense. Sheesh. RTD is off to a flying start. Yeah, I feel like this is just so weird. Like, I can imagine being a disabled actor, it's already incredibly difficult. And then you say, oh, you can't be a villain as well. That cuts off like half the roles. Rusty Davies, and to give Rusty Davies credit, he has been doing a good job of, you know, in fact, Chibnall as well. I'm gonna throw Chibnall in there as well. He's been doing a good job of kind of casting people who have disabilities and not specifically for their disabilities as well, which I think is all very well and good. He's casting great actors and he's also, but you know, just including more people in the show. And I personally think that's perfectly fine, but I just don't see the logic in that, oh, wheelchair users can't be allowed to play an evil character. Like, what the hell is that? I feel like a better decision, if you wanted to be at least more consistent, would be to have recast Julian Bleach. You know what I mean? I mean, it would have been strange because now you're definitely shining a spotlight on him being disabled. So I would have definitely been like as well. And I didn't know Davros was meant to be a wheelchair allegory, but I feel like the reaction definitely would have been a bit more positive. In fact, it would have been way more positive. Okay, Russell, Davros isn't a wheelchair user. I've been a wheelchair user and it didn't make me evil. Just mildly irritated by steps and high shelves. Davros is the product of 1,000-year war that brought two civilizations to the edge of extinction. His physical appearance is a metaphor and it's kind of key to his character. Davros made the Daleks in his his own image, this is known, so are the Daleks just going to be a bunch of bad guys in suits now? Because if so, I think Silence are about to sue somebody. This is a very funny comment. This is a good comment. I think he just hits it on the nose. I mean, I saw a video I recommended. I didn't actually click on it because I didn't have time, because I have to record this 2-hour and 10-minute video. Editing me, I'm sorry. But I saw this video I recommended, and it was from a disabled creator, and they were talking about how the Davros design, how much it meant to them, and how they were angry at the change. But it seems like there's been an outcry from all parts of the community. Moral of the story, never go on Twitter. Let's look at this one. I would say I am super progressive. This is a very stupid. And I agree it's made me very nervous going forward for what other things Davies might change flippantly going forward. I'm a bit worried about him becoming the Doctor Who tyrant. Now, I know what you mean, but at the same time, every showrunner is the Doctor Who tyrant. I kind of just wish he just wouldn't make so many comments. Just do. You don't need to explain yourself. We'll follow. I will, definitely. Eric Walter says it seems to create a problem or controversy that really wasn't there. Yeah, as someone who's done all this research to try and find the discussion that was happening before, there isn't any. There was not any. I think Davros in the chair will return at some point. Maybe under RTD. Who's gonna tell him? No one. Absolutely no one. Russell D. Davies. Davros in a wheelchair? This could be offensive to people. Let's just make him a regular guy. Different comment because my other one got too long. I think being nervous about the new era is valid. It's extremely ambitious. Almost too ambitious, but I don't know, man. This specific line may be your first cringe take. I can't read Russell T. Davies' intentions. Everything we say that aren't his words or confirmed sources is entirely speculation, but simplifying it to, I think it looks like a wheelchair. I haven't spoken to anyone else about it, but sure, they must be sad. Weirdly reductive of the situation. I'm not entirely sure about my thoughts on the matter, but Rusty Davies did make a point of the otherness that many other writers used to turn the audience further against the villain. In Davros' case, it was making him disabled to seem scary. I guess maybe cases I have done more research on are queer-coded characters like many Disney animated villains, and yes, everyone would be mad if Chibnall made the same point, maybe even more mad than about the Timeless Child. To sum up, you just gotta have a very distinguished palette to enjoy Destination Skaro. And you know what? I think this is a fair take. I thought this was fair when I read it. I even left a comment and I said this was really well written, really well worded. And I don't really have anything to respond with apart from thank you and I'll do better in the future. Let's look at this one. You'll realize Davros wasn't always in a wheelchair, right? And can you do reviews of Big Finish stories? Yes, I'm interested if there has been a worse retcon than this, because this seems pretty bad. Now, of course, don't want to bring up the Timeless Child, but I'm gonna. I personally think this is more egregious because it goes against stuff that's on screen, but Doctor Who, there's been just an infinite array of retcons. There's like a retcon every episode. So it isn't really like, oh my god, the worst retcon in history. That is because most modern day fans haven't seen Genesis of the Daleks. True. I just think it was a bad idea to introduce David Tennant as the 14th Doctor for the first time in a Cody sketch. It's completely off-putting, and the fact Rusty Davies said it wasn't going to be one has people all confused and riled up. I've seen so many comments thinking that this is the new canon. I've seen people say this is better than the Chibnall era already, which is mental because this was terribly written and the score was completely off. True. I think it was just a bad idea because it's kind of degraded my expectations for the 6th year. I doubt it, but I'm thinking, is this gonna be the new standard of writing from now on? I mean, I expected it to be a sketch. I wouldn't have been screwing my face up all the way through it. I think this is my exact opinion. I think me and this guy had like the exact same opinion while we were watching it, because that's basically exactly what I said. He just put all of my thoughts into concise wording. The writing and score was off. The 14th Doctor being introduced in a Cody sketch is weird, and it did kind of put a bad taste in my mouth looking onto the specials. But I will say with certainty, I am incredibly excited for the specials. I have really high expectations for them still. Don't worry, given a little bit of time, my expectations have bounced back up. I'm very looking forward to it. I'm sure it's going to be great, but I must confess, after watching the sketch, I was like, damn, is this what it's going to be like from now on? But anyway, on to the next one. I really don't see the problem. If Rusty Davies wants to do this design, then fine. Eventually a new showrunner will take over and Davros will return to his original design. True, very true. Can't argue with that, very true. This is a great commenter. Davros' design works great for Genesis of the Daleks, but can you justify his look for his New Who appearances? Yeah. Well, his hand got shot off in Revelation of the Daleks, so that's why he's got the metal hand. And he was reborn from the Time War, and he actually reused Dalek flesh to bring himself back. And I think that justifies his appearance as New Who. Just because it worked before doesn't mean it will work now. Have faith that the writers would be able to make Davros as interesting as he was back then, and stop clinging to the past. Let the past die. Kill it if you have to. We will always have Genesis of the Daleks. It's not going anywhere. Very, very true. The classic series is not going anywhere. The classic series, as you guys know, is the series I mostly mainly entirely watch, and it's the show which I'm a fan of. I am a fan of Doctor Who. I'm a fan of the original show. So all of this new stuff from 2005 onward, I usually take all of it with a pinch of salt. It's fun fan fiction, but doesn't hold a candle. However, I don't think I need to justify anything. I think the reason Davros looks like Davros in Journey's End is because he looks like Davros, right? He's the same character. Yes, Russell T Davies' scripts are not as thematically rich as Terry Nation's, but I don't think that means that we have to just abandon the design. Just my opinion though, as I said, this is a great commenter. I did cut it off because it was so long and the video is already going on as long as it has. So don't get me wrong, I'm a lefty loony progressive accepting MF. I don't sound like you're all snowflakes, but I feel like Russell T Davies is going a little overkill on the wokeness. Like I said, I'm all for the woke teas, but I feel like this is what you would call political correctness gone mad. A phrase I don't like. I don't like the phrase either. It's like I feel like no one asked for this. No one is mad at Davros' design. No one would have been mad if David Tennant wore Jodie's gender-neutral costume. Yeah, like no one cared. By the way, I don't like the word wokeness either. All these buzzwords, this cultural stuff, count me out, man, please. This video seems to be made in poor faith. Firstly, Rusty Davies hasn't retconned anything. It can easily be assumed that this Davros is just pre-accident. Davies never said how Davros will show up in this way again, if he even shows up again soon. Secondly, just because you personally haven't heard any complaints about the correlation between disability and humanity in stories doesn't mean it isn't a very common trope that goes back hundreds of years. I feel like saying my video's made in poor faith implies that like I'm debating or arguing something, or I'm not like a massive fan of Doctor Who. What do you mean poor faith? The episode where I called Rusty Davies a goat and sung his praises and talked about how I respected him, I admired him, that is done in poor faith? Like how? I just voiced my disagreement and sung my praises of Genesis of the Daleks. That's basically what the video was. You showed a screenshot of the Google search Davros and ableist having 0 results. If you make that search yourself instead of using a screenshot from Twitter, bro thinks how dare you? How dare you? I find it insulting. I searched that up myself, thank you very much. You'll see multiple blog posts and articles and personal opinions on exactly what Rusty Davies said. Well, the thing is that that's technically not true, because you will see a blog post from 2009, the one that he mentions. But as I said, I have actually checked for myself. I did not go on Twitter to find a screenshot. Are you kidding me? But outside of that one example from 2009, there just isn't anything. Like there really isn't anything. Like maybe there's like a one-off Tumblr post, and that's it. That's about it. There's nothing. There's no records of it. I don't think my video was made in poor faith. That's just my opinion though. Leave it in the comments below if you think I'm a bad faith masturbator. If I'm in bad faith, I don't know. Let's keep going. Now this is a very long comment, but I want to point out, look at this end. For me personally, I'd leave him in the wheelchair just without all the scarring. That's literally the opposite of what people were saying at the start of the video. Don't forget, Disney owns Doctor Who now. It does not. It doesn't. Disney does not own Doctor Who. I'm stamping that myth out. It's not true. Misinformation, false. Doctor Who is not owned by Disney. I wish instead of this, Rusty Davies would just add some good, not just superficially morally good, but well-developed, rounded, disabled characters. As a gay guy, I'd much rather a show add other gay characters instead of getting rid of a campy villain. And I think Rusty Davies understands this when it comes to his own community, but he just doesn't apply that logic to other people for some reason. I don't know. All good and all, but why the Joker intro, bro? It's because I'm a clown. If Chris Chibnall had said this, would you like it? Why do you seem to think that question would matter here? It's because there's a double standard between Rusty Davies and Chris Chibnall. I mean, please try and keep up, man. Like, how many times do I have to mention this? It feels like I do it every video. This is a big one. All the people attacking the new design and saying you've never heard of it being a problem? Maybe because you don't run in those circles. Come on, man, like at least try with the gaslighting. I just don't see the problem. We've got 40+ years of disabled villain Davros. Let's have some non-disabled Davros for a bit. You see, maybe you'd be able to get away with that if you hadn't previously just completely exposed your ideological reason for it. You can't just say, oh, I was bored and we need to shake up the story just after you say that you think it's a problem. It's that or never see Davros again, which you would complain about too. Why is that the ultimatum? It's mainly the fact that a lot of baddies are disabled / disfigured in some way. The Master, mental illness / trauma. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I've been hiding this up my sleeve for ages. Do you know who introduced the Master having mental illness? Do you know who introduced the Master having tinnitus? Do you know who did that? It was Russell T Davies. That was not a part of the character before. I like how this guy brings up Lumic and Max Capricorn as if they're not Rusty Davies characters either. This isn't just Doctor Who specific. Well, I don't care about anything apart from Doctor Who, so I'm just going to ignore that. All the able-bodied people fighting against this change are pathetic. Wow, that's, you know, really vitriolic language. Doctor Who has never been exactly canon. And he ends it all with, "It is not a big deal. It's a TV show!" And I had to respond. It was a too long comment, so I obviously couldn't go into detail about, why I disagreed with everything, but I said, if it's not a big deal, why change it? Because either you're arguing that the media we consume is important and what is shown in media is important, or, well, it's only a TV show, it doesn't matter. If you think it doesn't matter, and I think that it does matter, surely I should be the one to make the decision. This is a funny comment. Rusty here demonstrates perfectly the difference between a liberal and an actual leftist. A liberal hears about the disabled evil trope and their response is, "Oh no, this has been deemed wrong, so we have to remove it, it's been deemed wrong. I see why this is wrong." This is such a fucking Reddit comment. Of course, the reality here is that this guy doesn't know what a liberal is, and that his straw man is literally just what happens with leftists. You can guess which side I fall on. I can. Grow the fuck up. Davros has always been garbage, and now they have improved him. This was for a kid special. Most of you Doctor Who fans have bad taste. Grow up. It's 2023. I mean, he kind of cooked, I'm not gonna lie. Most Doctor Who fans do have bad taste. I mean, he said it, not me. I mean, this links back into what I said before. My question is, who do you think you should listen to? The person who says that Davros has always been garbage, or me, the person who actually likes the character? As soon as people say stuff like, "Oh, Davros is bad," or "Oh, the classic era is bad," or "Oh, this stuff has always been bad," I'm just not gonna listen to you, because why should I care? I have to care about what Doctor Who fans' opinion on stuff is. There seems to be a big thing going around where a lot of people are like, "Oh, we need to listen to non-fans of the show." But like, why? Why would I care about a Doctor Who hater's opinion? And this isn't even talking about this comment or any of the comments that we've got in the video. I'm talking about comments on, like, you go on like The Guardian and you go into the comments and you've got people who are like, "I've never watched the show Doctor Who, it's never been for me, it's shit, and now I see it's turned more shit." Like, that's the typical comment that you'll see. Are we meant to listen to that? Are we meant to value that opinion? Who do you think has a better take on sci-fi? A sci-fi writer or someone who doesn't like sci-fi? Just my opinion though, of course. At the end of the day, I do need to grow up. Okay, I think this is a really good one to end on, from one of the best people in the comment section, Oz Baxter. I saw this comment and I just had to take a screenshot. I don't have anything constructive or positive to say about what I've seen so far of this new era of Doctor Who. And I, for one, have to agree. For all the people saying, "Oh, give it a chance, give it a chance." We are 13 months in, people. I don't like the idea of the Whoniverse. Tales of the TARDIS was kind of middling. This skit was kind of middling. I hate the idea of the 14th Doctor. I'm not all too keen on Rusty Davies coming back as a full-time showrunner. I like the idea of him writing the 60th, but him running all of the series? I don't know about that. I don't like the episode count being lowered to 8 episodes. I don't really like the Disney Plus deal. I don't like anything I've heard about the Disney deal. I don't like the seasons resetting. I don't like how it looks like they're doing End of Time Part 3. I think the only real shining light for me right now as a fan is Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson. They seem great. So far I've seen a few things behind the scenes. They seem great. They seem like really nice people. They seem to really care about their job and their program. And I'm really looking forward to what energy and life they bring to the show after the 60th anniversary specials. And that's the video. How long was this, man? The recording itself is 2.5 hours. So I can only imagine how horrible it has been for me to edit this. But I hope you all enjoyed. Happy birthday, Doctor Who. Doctor Who, my beloved. I wish I could have made a massive celebration for Doctor Who's 60th anniversary, like an edit or something, but I don't really make edits. I'm not really that type of guy. The best I could do is this.
All my fellas. 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 All my fellas.
Happy birthday, Doctor Who. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. If you want to help support the channel, you can click the join button below to become a member, gain access to exclusive perks. A special thanks to all my members, and I'm very appreciative of everyone who watched this far. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.